On February 19th, 1942, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, where 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry were forced from their homes and had to report to different centers.
Due to the fear for many Americans, on February 19th, 1942, President Roosevelt ended up signing an executive order authorizing the removal of any or all people from military areas as deemed necessary or desirable. And by June, more than 100,000 Japanese Americans were relocated to remote internment camps built by the U.S. military in sacred locations around the country.
They then moved on to one of the 10 internment camps, or war relocation centers, in California, Arizona, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, and Arkansas. Once families arrived, they were assigned a living quarter, and even though families were allowed to live together, they were assigned small, poorly equipped living quarters. This relocation of Japanese Americans was the most flagrant violation of civil liberties in American history.
For the next 2.5 years, many of these Japanese Americans were endured extremely difficult living conditions and poor treatment from their military guards.
Many internment camps turned entire barracks into schools because they were poorly equipped for the number of children that arrived. These makeshift schools became unbearable in the heat due to the limited windows, so lots of the time children didn't even attend. While the children were in school, most of the adults chose to work because it helped pass the time, and most camps couldn't run nearly as smoothly without the help of internees.
They lived in very tight living quarters, resulting in the spread of many diseases such as typhoid, dysentery, and smallpox.
When we look at the U.S.'s reaction up to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we can question the constitutionality of the internment of Japanese Americans. In the Constitution, the U.S. ended up violating about 13 basic rights of the Japanese American people.
Some of the more important ones include the freedom of unreasonable search and seizure, the freedom from cruel and unusual punishment, the right against involuntary servitude, and most importantly, the right to equal protection under the law.
This right was violated when the U.S. interned people based solely on race and ancestry. The government failed to compensate for the loss of property rights, and they were deprived of liberty, property, and they were forced out of their jobs and homes and communities into barbed wired internment camps.
But obviously, the government has reasoning for the internment of Japanese Americans. During war, the checks and balance system is always tipped in favor of the executive branch. The nation's priorities also tip in favor of national security. The justification for the internments came out in the court case Korematsu versus the U.S. The case was about a man named Fred Korematsu.
Korematsu was an American citizen of Japanese ancestry. He refused to be relocated from his home in California and was convicted. The court case eventually went to the Supreme Court. The court upheld Korematsu's conviction by a vote of 6-3.
Justice Hugo Black claimed that legal restrictions of a certain racial group may be questioned if it is constitutional or not, but the quote, pressing public necessity may sometimes justify the existence of such restrictions, end quote. The court ruled that the nation's security concerns outweigh the Constitution's promise of equal protection. Over the course of World War I, 10 Americans were convicted of spying for the Japanese, but not one of them was of Japanese ancestry. On December 17, 1944, U.S. Major Henry C. Pratt issued Public Proclamation No. 21, declared that effective of January 2, 1945, all Japanese American evacuees from the West Coast could return to their homes. In March of 1946, the last camp was closed. By 1948, law provided for reimbursement for property losses by those interned. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill to compensate each surviving internee with a tax-free check for $20,000 and an apology from the U.S. government.
Today, we can see the similar fear in our attitudes towards the Muslims. There's a fear that if we let Muslims into the U.S., they might bring terrorist attacks. We can only hope that the government now doesn't react in the same way the government did in World War II.
In 1924, about 20 years before the end of World War II, the U.S. banned immigration from Japan, except for a few token immigrants. This is obviously very similar to the Muslim ban Trump has been trying to pass. Hopefully 20 years from now we won't be facing World War III. We looked at why the government made the decision to intern the Japanese Americans in World War II after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. There was a general feeling of fear around the unexpected attack on Pearl Harbor. Life in the internment camps was harsh and cruel. We question the constitutionality of the internment of the Japanese Americans. Although the executive order was passed and Korematsu lost his court case, it is safe to say that what the U.S. did in response to Japan's attack was unconstitutional and certainly unjust.